Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Transgender Show. I'm your host, Emily. I'm excited about my guest tonight, Allie Smith. Allie is a queer disabled small business owner living in Southeast Kansas. They're an ex-evangelical millennial, so they want you to know that Faye is an Enneagram 1 with a 2 wing. Enneagram 1 with a 2 wing. I'm just learning about Enneagram and don't quite have it yet. They are the founder of Q-Space, a local not-for-profit and community of support for LGBTQIAP+ people in Southeast Kansas, and have recently started the Witchy Bibliophile, where they upcycle, forage, and grow witchy items for your magical needs. They are your go-to green witch and aspiring herbalist. Their tagline is, "If I'm not digestible to you, you can choke." Welcome to the show, Allie. Hi.
Hi, Emily. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here, for being willing to come on and share your story. We really appreciate it.
Of course.
I would say I made it through your bio, sort of. I prefer not to make the stumbles, but it's what makes the show kind of alive, right?
Of course. We're all human.
Yeah. There's a lot of great stuff to unpack there in your bio, so I can't wait to dive into it. For the record, starting off, how do you identify?
So yeah, my name's Allie, and I use they, them, and fae, fair pronouns. I identify as non-binary or gender fluid or gender fae. All of those terms kind of work for me. And I also identify as bisexual and queer.
Great. Thank you for clearing all that up. Please feel free to correct me if at some point I'm using a pronoun or identifying you in some way where you'd prefer to be identified another. Jumping into your story with my favorite question, did you get to choose your name? And if so, how? How did
So yeah,
you come on that?
So, no, well, my full name is Allison, and I don't use that. I use my nickname Allie, and I have most of my life, and I never really identified with my full name. But that's something that I've been thinking more about lately.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime I hear the word Allison, I just like cringe,
Okay.
and I think I'm in trouble or I'm about to go to the doctor because, at the doctor, they like used your full name and then they like call you in and you're like, and I have white coat syndrome and I'm chronically ill. So it's like a great mixture there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, Allie just kind of suits me, I think. I've thought a little bit about other names, but then I'm like, I don't know. I feel like this just kind of suits me.
Great. So, when did you first realize or start to identify that the term non binary or gender fluid was what fit with you? When did you come to, not really, yeah, when did you come to terms with that?
Yeah. So I'm a late bloomer. So I came out as bisexual about 4 years ago. And around that same time, I think I just started really evaluating and reflecting on who I am as a person and who I want to be, and kind of unpacking past traumas, all of that fun stuff.
Yeah.
And that's kind of when I started to think about. I'm like, well, what about my gender? I'm like, well, I just think that I'm a girl. Like, I guess, like that's what I was told. So like, I guess that's fine. But I always came back to it. Like I always would think about it all the time, and I'm like, am I? I don't know. Am I a girl? I don't know. And then I was like, do cis people think about this all the time? And like I would like I I think I tweeted that one time. I'm like, do cis people think about this all the time? And people are like, no. And I was like, oh, well, like I don't really know. And then I had several friends, come out as either non-binary or trans. And so it made me think about it, even more, and just like over the last few years. I didn't come out officially until like last year. Um, and it was actually like non-binary. I think it was like non-binary awareness day that I was like, hey, to my friends, I was like, hey, like, I don't think I'm a girl. Maybe try using they, them pronouns for me. And one of my friends did so on Facebook because I like to forage. And that summer I was just driving around, like you do in Kansas, and picking wildflowers. And so I was like picking wildflowers and putting them in vases and like delivering them to my friends. And I delivered them to one of my friends, and they posted about on Facebook and like tagged me and used they them pronouns in the post. And I was just like, oh, I just got this feeling like gender euphoria feeling where
Wonderful.
I was like, oh, that's me. That's me. And anytime I get that feeling, it's just like, oh, it's just like I'm settling in a little bit more to my identity and who I am. And
Hmm.
I've had those little snippets, and they happen more often. And the more I'm with my people who affirm who I am.
Oh, that's wonderful. So, as someone who's binary and trying to help, educate everybody out there who's watching, when you get euphoria, or when, at least when you had it at that point, at the of they them being identified that way, is it is that an identity that you feel strongly, or is it more strong that you're not being identified as she at that point?
Um, I don't have really anything against she pronouns. I think that um, they're just kind of meh. I guess. And like pronouns don't exactly equal gender. I people could call me she, and I would still be non-binary.
Hmm.
Um, and I know many people who use she and they pronouns who are non-binary, and he they pronouns who are non-binary, and but I don't know if it was also just like the love and intention put in from a friend too, of affirming like my exploration as well. Um, but they and Faye definitely seem to fit better and make me feel more myself in my own skin.
Hmm. I found that as I've moved through my transition, and learned to accept myself and my identity, looking back at my past, at my childhood, I can see sort of breadcrumbs and the things that I might have, a more astute person might have been able to see and go, oh yeah, that this is leading somewhere. Looking back for you, do you have some of those memories that kind of provide a roadmap for where you are now?
Oh, so many. Yes. And being a late bloomer with, sexuality and gender identity, like I have, what I call like bisexual flashbacks. And now I'm having, the non binary flashbacks too of those moments where you're like, oh, why didn't anyone tell me? like, I think, and I felt that way too. Like the way that my friends reacted when I told them was just kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, okay. And I was like, how long have you known? like,
And why didn't you tell me?
yeah. um, they were just kind of like, it wasn't, which is fine. But I was like, yeah, I feel like you knew before I did. And they're like, you've been like talking about this on Twitter and like in person for like a while now. And I'm like, I have. I didn't really recognize it either. I thought, or maybe I thought I was being covert in my like questioning around them, but I wasn't. Um, and as a kid, I think I never really, I had, I was kind of split into, or very forced into the gender role of, being a girl and what a girl looks like and what a girl dresses like. I think when I was young, they kind of let me do whatever I want, right? Whenever you're like 6 and under, you can wear what you want and do what you want. They're just like, yeah, they're just a child. They play in the same box. They get muddy. They run around. They climb trees. They eat mulberries. They climb on the barn. Like they do all those different things. They dress, in whatever they want. They play dress up in their siblings' clothes, like I think that for me, like it wasn't, me dressing up in like different genders' clothes or necessarily, but just like being able to dress like how I wanted and having different colors and that sort of thing. But as I grow older, that's when those expectations come in of, oh, you need a bra now. Oh, you're going to start your period soon. Like those types of things come into play. And, I was having this conversation with someone recently where I'm like, do you ever just like forget that you have a uterus? Like, and they were like, no. She was like, no. And I'm like, well, sometimes I just forget. Like, I feel like it shouldn't be there. Like, I just should be like an empty vessel or something. Like, and like I'm surprised if like my period comes or something. And
yeah, those
they were like,
unfortunate times where you're reminded of
"Oh."
your birth gender.
Yeah. Well, like it doesn't necessarily bother me to extreme, but it's just kind of like that shouldn't be there. Like that shouldn't be there, and I'm also I'm a person who is child free and wants to be child free too. So like that's not necessarily something that I need or want. So that kind of comes into, I'm like, oh yeah, I do have those parts and like those don't necessarily fit.
Yeah, that kind of ties in with my story a bit. On the opposite side, it was always like, so wait, other boys don't like dream of being able to have a baby or are not jealous of pregnant women. Oh, okay.
Yeah. I always felt like you should just have like body parts or genitals that just were the most convenient for you. Like I felt like I was kind of jealous of my brothers who got to like pee standing up, and I was like, I would try to pee standing up too. And I'd be like, this is difficult. Like, wouldn't it be easier if I had different equipment here? Not necessarily that I like wanted a penis, but like I was like, whatever's convenient in the moment, like it doesn't really matter to me.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think that fluidity I kind of see throughout my childhood of just kind of going with the flow and not necessarily and being confused when people are like, no, you need to fit here,
Mhm.
is something that I see.
Yeah. So now, I mean, you're still relatively new into this and kind of figuring out where you fit, how it fits you. You mentioned clothing before and how that didn't fit for you, and you were supposed to be a certain way. Do you feel it? Do you feel now a pressure to present in a way that's non-binary, to find what that is and how you're supposed to look? Or do you feel like you're free to just truly wear whatever you want to wear?
That depends on the day. um, I really do like fashion and like putting together, different outfits, whether they're high femme outfits or more androgynous outfits or what I feel like is a little mask, and kind of playing with that a little bit. Um, or kind of mixing the two. But what I kind of feel like as well is, it just what I feel is kind of like a mask outfit. Other people don't see as one.
Mm.
A lot of times, how I present, I kind of had this realization recently. I think during a presentation I was giving for Q Space to a group of people. I was just like, because we were talking about passing, and I'm like, I'm never going to pass. I'm never going to walk into a room and someone be like, oh, that person's non-binary. I don't think I'm ever going to fit that. Maybe unless we as a society kind of change. From what I see, people put people in boxes.
Mm-hmm.
People put people in a binary of you're either a boy or a girl, a man or a woman, when they see you. And we're taught that from birth, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're taught that to put people in those boxes and those categories, and that's why people get kind of confused, And older
Yeah.
people get confused more often, I think. I shaved my head right when the pandemic started, so almost 2 years ago, and a couple months into the pandemic. And I did have shorter hair then, so it wasn't super extreme. Like, I didn't have hair as long as yours, Emily, but I had a pixie cut, and it was getting long, and everything was closed down. And I think I used that as kind of an excuse, like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna shave my head, like. But I've always wanted to do it. Always wanted to do it. And when I did it, oh, I felt so empowered. I was just like, man, I'm a boss. I'm a badass. Oh my God. Like, this is me. And and now I shave my head like every couple weeks. I just
Mm-hmm.
shaved it this morning. And that gives me gender euphoria too. And like,
Nice.
but this is the only thing I think that confuses people a little bit sometimes. I had an older gentleman ask me, he just kind of looked at me. He's like, are you a boy or a girl?
Well, that's the
And
perfect opportunity because you're like, no.
no, neither. Like, and you in those situations, you kind of like, when you're out and about and you don't know someone, you're like, okay, do I want to have this conversation with someone or do I want to just be like, neither, and then run away? Or because I'm not someone, I'm not someone that lies ever unless I feel completely unsafe. Um, and in that moment, I didn't feel unsafe. He was just really confused.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, do I explain this to him or not? Um, but so there are varying moments like that. Um, and those are like, I'm like, I have confused you. This is the point. I
Did it?
have this, I have this mug right here that says like causing confusion for the straights, and it's the gender fay flag. And I made this mug um, because me and my friend were talking about this, who they are also non-binary, and um, we were talking about an acquaintance of ours who seemed to have an attraction to my friend, but was very confused about it because they're like, well, what does this now mean about my sexuality?
Mm-hmm.
And like, am I straight or not? Am I still straight if like I'm attracted to like a non-binary person? And so we were joking. We're like, we just can cause confusion for the straights all the time.
One thing
And
that you mentioned there was the fact that people like to put people in boxes and sort of alluding to that they can kind of only understand the two. There's this side or that side, and that's all that people can handle. The interesting thing though is you in that you said boy or girl, man or woman, and that made me think like we can understand toddler and child and preteen or tween and teen and young adult and then someone who's elderly. Dragging this out too long, but we can understand as a society. There are proven pieces where it's like we can understand a spectrum where someone's where people are at varying places in the spectrum. So that thought really kind of gave me hope of like, maybe there is a way to get people to truly accept this and understand it. And it shouldn't be this hard because there are those places where even when we're talking about people, that there are spectrums involved.
Yeah. You know, I like to talk about that all the time. I'm like, the really what is binary anyway? It's a social construct. And, you know, even biological sex isn't binary.
Hmm.
Um, you know how many varying chromosomes people can have? And who goes and gets their chromosomes tested, right? Like, do you know for sure that you have XY chromosomes, person, or XX chromosomes? Like, does every single person who is like, I am biologically female or biologically male, do they actually know if they are? They may be intersex, you
Hmm.
know, like, and that's something that I bring up a lot too. I'm like, nothing is really binary, is it?
Hmm. Yeah, very true. Another thing that you mentioned in your bio, you identify as queer and disabled. How does the disability affect and pertain to your gender transition or your gender identity exploration?
Yeah. You know, disability really makes you think about your relationship with your body and whether you know you're physically disabled or not. I'm chronically ill. I have POTS or postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, another tongue twister for you. Um, and I also have probably many undiagnosed things. My doctor suspects I have fibromyalgia. And so I have chronic pain and also chronic fatigue since I had COVID 2 years ago. So all of those things combined, um, you know, but when people look at me, just like when they look at me and they're thinking about my gender identity, you know, they make certain assumptions, right? They look at me usually and they see a woman. Um, And when people look at me, they also see what they think is a healthy person, right? Oh, like she doesn't look sick. This person doesn't look sick. They don't act sick all the time. They seem fine. Um, and part of that, I think, is also part of that. I think is also a mask um, that I wear sometimes too, right?
Hmm.
Like um, like I told you before, like if someone asked me about like are you a boy or a girl or asked me about my gender, you know, I would first kind of evaluate if I was safe, right?
Hmm.
And for me, I think in this period of time, it's a little safer for me to be out as queer and non-binary than out as disabled.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I have a cane and I don't use it all the time because I don't need to use it all the time. My disability is dynamic. So I could be feeling okay one day, and then the next day I can't get off the couch. Um, I can't do anything for myself.
Hmm.
Um, so that chronic pain and that chronic fatigue kind of go up and down. There's a spectrum there too.
Yeah.
um, so it changes every day. But when I've had to use my cane, you know, there are so many stares and so many looks that I get um, because I appear to be a young, healthy person.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not sure if that answered the question, but
I think it does, and I have a follow up because it's interesting that the disability you have, your level of disability, and your gender identity seem very parallel in that you, from an outward appearance, look a certain way and thus carry a certain privilege, and when you express or that the other identity expresses itself without your control, then it seems to kind of cause it definitely causes attention. It brings attention.
Definitely.
And I would assume that there's a certain point where, because of the way you look, and when you're not presenting symptoms of the disability, or you're not presenting particularly mask or whatever in your identity, that it's difficult to talk about it, to persuade people that I'm not non-binary, no, I am disabled, and actually sort of like fight for yourself and your rights in those regards.
Definitely. Yeah. I've had moments where, I go to a doctor appointment and I'm like, well, I don't necessarily need my cane today, but if I brought my cane, would I be taken more seriously by my doctor? Probably.
Mm-hmm. Well, I gotta assume with something that's dynamic like that, that sort of comes and goes, it's really hard to convince healthcare people sometimes that it is real and that you really are experiencing that. Have you had a lot of that experience with the healthcare professionals?
Definitely. I say that I probably have some undiagnosed things is because, I think that being diagnosed is a privilege in itself. Because I had symptoms that progressively got worse with my POTS, starting at, age 21 up until age 26 is whenever I decided I'm going to try to get diagnosed. And like, I think that I have this, which I pretty much diagnosed myself because
Mm-hmm.
I was correct. Um, and, I had read all the things about, what you can do to control or minimize your symptoms and to live your life the best way possible. And I was doing those things and still, struggling. So I decided, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to get this diagnosis. Um, Took me over a year of fighting, over $10,000 in medical debt. And I got that diagnosis. Um, and I had to like squeeze it out of that cardiologist. I was like, because what they were focusing on was the fact that when I had my tilt table test, which is a fun test where they strap you to a table and then slowly move the table up to where you're standing, strapped to a table. You're strapped to a table just in case you faint, which you probably will faint the way they do the test if you have dysautonomia or some form of POTS, which I did. They had me up, they were talking to me, passed out. Um, and so everyone's freaking out, at the time. I didn't even know what was going on. I was like, hello. And so whenever I had that follow-up appointment, I'm like, okay, he's going to tell me everything. He's going to tell me exactly when my blood pressure dropped. He's going to tell me when, how the diagnosis was formed and all this different stuff. And he was just like, we want to put you on this medication because this will blah, 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 blah. And I was like, so like, tell me exactly what happened in the test. Tell me when this, he's like, oh, I don't have that in front of me. I was like, what is the point of this appointment? Like, I want to know like what happened and how, obviously this is going to, affect my life. It still is affecting my life. When I freaking stand up from a sitting to standing position, my body freaks out. It's like when, you have your dash on your car and all your lights come on. My body's like, what? Why are we standing? And, that's something, the average person can do. Stand without having their body freak out on them. And I'm like, okay, how are we going to make this happen? And he's giving me a med. I'm like, okay, fine. And that, I've had, good experiences with medication and bad experiences. And this is one of those that wasn't so good, and tanked my potassium levels and gave me like crippling cramps all throughout my body. I'm still like working through because having to take prescription strength potassium every day because my levels are still not back to normal. Um, but I went through all of that to get that diagnosis, and nothing changed for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was still the one in charge of my health. I was still the one who was supposed to be doing all the research.
Mm,
I was still the one who was, trying different compression wear, figuring out what worked. For myself, I was the one creating herbal concoctions to help myself. It wasn't doctors, it wasn't medical professionals. Um, so after that, I was like, what's the point of getting any diagnosis?
right. Yeah.
For a chronically ill person, where, that's not going to go away and there's no cure. If doctors aren't going to be helping you with managing your symptoms and being able to live your life, like, what's the point?
Yeah. It's very, very sad and frustrating to have to be your own complete healthcare advocate and, like you said, researcher and sort of, yeah, caregiver.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
sounds like one of the keys in, some of these disabilities, some of these ailments that people have, that it's really important to have that information when you go into the doctor, to have that awareness about it and the information, so you can at least go in and ask and say, here's what I'm experiencing, this is what I've heard, is this what I have, and how do we figure that out for real?
Yeah.
As you looked into doing the research, where did you look to do research that was helpful and accurate and not, I mean, like, I always love talking about how, like, you look up something in WebMD, you've got a symptom, you look it up on WebMD and you're dying. Like, no matter what
Yes.
it is, whatever, what symptom, it always leads to you're dying of something. So how were you able to do research that led you down the right path to actually diagnosing what it was that you had?
Yeah. So figuring out, my symptoms and everything led me to, honestly, I don't even know. I went through so many rabbit holes from the originally whenever I was looking up, and figuring out, like, okay, I have some form of dysautonomia, which is autonomic dysfunction or dysfunction of the autonomic system, which, pretty much does everything in your body. Almost.
So you narrowed
And
it
there
down to you had a body problem. Sweet.
yeah.
Cool.
Which, like, I knew I had, like, inappropriate sinus tachycardia, which pretty much means that my heart beats really fast sometimes.
Hmm.
And that, along with the fainting, along with, some other things, I led me to this. And then um, showed me, other symptoms of autonomic dysfunction. I'm like, oh yeah, I have those too. Um, and then going into those online support groups and online, like, Facebook groups of people who actually had dysautonomia or POTS, and talking through, like, their experiences, talking to real people who were experiencing the same things that I was. Um, those are a much more accurate depiction of the illness than WebMD.
Hmm.
Um, Now, because there is, a form of dysautonomia that's like autonomic system failure or something like that, where it's like, oh yeah, you will have horrible symptoms until this stage and then you'll die. And so, that can be scary whenever you read those things. But at this point, you have to kind of cope with humor a lot of times. So sometimes that gets a little dark.
Right.
Whenever
Yeah.
I'm looking at things and I'm like, oh, I have a new symptom, which I am a very organized person for the most part. So I
Oh,
have
good.
a document where I keep a list of all my medications and supplements I'm taking and herbs
Hmm.
for, whenever the doctor asks. I'm like, I'm not going to list these off. Here's a piece of paper. And and I also have a list of, every reoccurring symptom that I have ever had. And so when a new one comes up, I'm like, okay, Am I dying?
And I can just tell, yeah, as someone who's really organized, I can imagine it's this whole chart where it's just like, okay, I've got this symptom, but it happens at this color of frequency level, and this one's this color because it happens at this frequency level.
Yeah. Just, yeah. Like one of the symptoms that I have had for the longest amount of time is like dizziness and vertigo. And I learned from a pretty early start, which I don't even know how I figured this out, honestly, that like Benadryl helped. And so I thought it was like some allergy symptom. And I'm like, dizziness, allergies. I'm like, I don't know. So I was just like, Benadryl works. If I take Benadryl every night, then I'm mostly not dizzy. And if I miss a night, then I would be like on the floor, wouldn't be able to move.
Hmm.
And but I would still have some dizzy days, even with taking the Benadryl. I call them dizzy days. But for the most part, I was functional. And I really wanted to figure out that symptom at one point. And I got sent to so many ear, nose, and throat doctors. 4. So, 4.
That's still a lot. That's a lot. When you go through setting up an appointment and all the paperwork and all that stuff, it's still a lot. 4 is high.
Because I got allergy tests done, and the allergy test told me I was only allergic to the 2 types of dust mites there are, right? And for environmental allergies. And that it wasn't even an extreme allergy, like on a scale of 1 to 5, it was like a 2. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense either, because I have allergy symptoms all year round, and I do everything you're supposed to do when you have a dust mite allergy, which is, like not have carpet, put all these different things on your bed where dust mites live, and, all these different things. And I was sent to all these ENTs to figure out the dizziness thing, because a lot of times if your hearing is off in one ear versus the other, like you hear better in one ear than the other, that'll cause dizziness and vertigo. And I didn't even know that was a thing. And so I'm like, why are you testing my hearing? I'm dizzy. And they're like, oh, your hearing is perfect. I'm like, okay, great. And they looked at my ears and they're like, your ears are also perfect. I had 4 ENTs tell me that my ears, not the outside, okay, not the outside, but the inside of my ears, like my ear canal, my eardrum, should be in a textbook. And I was like, great. Like, this doesn't help me.
Yeah,
unless
not helping.
You're telling me I can get paid for my ears to be in a textbook so I can pay for these appointments.
Oh, how frustrating.
And still haven't, figured that part out really. They just kind of blamed it on my autonomic dysfunction. So I think that there's probably more to that story. I figured out that lymph node massages actually help quite a bit. So I don't know if that is part of it, my lymph nodes. But I've recently taken so many different routes to figure out what helps and what doesn't. Like, I see the chiropractor, I see a massage therapist, I see my regular doctor, and now I'm seeing a physical therapist who is doing a facial counter strain technique on me, and I just had my first session. So I'm doing all the things to figure it out, and to try to figure out what works for me, because every individual is different. Whenever you look in those support groups too, there are some things that help a lot of people, but then they don't help others, So we're still individual people, even if we have similar diagnoses.
Yeah, so you've got your sheet of all your symptoms and all of that, and now you got to cross-reference it with the people that have tried the different things, and like, okay, this works, this doesn't work, and make this really complex map of everything.
Yes, I was talking about this with my friend, and about how I'm like, I could probably diagnose you better than your doctor. And I'm like,
I have the experience now, yeah.
That sounds really egotistical, but I was like, oh, you probably have this, because I'm like, statistically, if I have POTS, I probably have this other thing that has a high comorbidity. I have trouble with that word. But and so I'm like, okay, I'm going to look into these other things that I have a high comorbidity for and see if those are possibilities.
Mhm.
And then, so I've learned a lot about different chronic illnesses through that. And so sometimes when my friends talk about things, I'm like, are you sure you don't have a connective tissue disorder? Like,
Ah, I love it. Yeah, dropping the doctor knowledge on them. I'm still struck by the similarities between this and gender identity, in that the thing that really helped you figure this out and find it was finding other people with similar stories. Very
definitely.
right in line with what we're doing here, trying to share our stories so that people out there see themselves, see aspects of their life in ours, and go, oh, there is somebody that's experiencing the same thing I am. I am okay, or this is what I need to do next. So it's just those parallels are very interesting to me. So it looks like you've sort of, I mean, I wouldn't say you've had any kind of a mentor or someone to look to guide you through your disability diagnoses, but when it comes to gender, did you have anybody that you looked at as a role model, or perhaps somebody that you had as a confidant to help guide you through?
Um, Not any like one particular person, I don't think. But I think that I have really, really good friends who are family, who are all queer in some way or some form or another, who are open to, asking those questions and helping kind of figure out how you feel about, different things, and kind of, exploring that unknown when you're figuring things out. And just kind of being like, yeah, we can try out those pronouns. Let's see how you feel about them when we, reference you.
Hmm.
Um, and if, and they check in and they're like, oh, so did that work for you? Like, do you want me to keep using that pronoun? As you're kind of figuring that out. And like, also for like gender fluidity, kind of talking about like maybe some days like that pronoun doesn't sound right. That doesn't fit me. Or for me, it's more um, not so much pronouns as, just other words used to reference people, like just phrases people say, like, hey, lady. Oh, I hate being called lady. I'm like, oh, please do not call me a lady. Really want a pin that says that.
What's funny is the one where that strikes me the most is the um, uh, you know patriarchy, the negative things that, like, when you like are berating yourself, or like when I'm like mad at myself or something. um all of the things I have in my toolbox have some masculine connotation to them, and it's taken me a while to really adopt and just kind of stick. The only one that I have is bitch. That's the only one that I can like use for myself, like
Yeah.
but everything else, and I'm blanking on what those are right now, but every other term that I had in my arsenal was somehow gendered masculine. It's like there just aren't things like that. I guess you're just not supposed to berate yourself as a woman.
Yeah. Um, I made up a little graphic for my friends that and I'm like, this is a ever working graphic. Like it may change tomorrow. Like
Mm-hmm.
who knows? But it checked off like pronouns I like word like terms of endearment, or like phrases that you can, use to refer to me. And then ones that I'm not really sure about, like, uh, maybe use this and then maybe we can figure it out if I like it or not. And then ones that I'm like, please don't call me that. Please
The
don't
hard no
reference.
list.
Yes. Um, cause yeah, yeah. And I'm like, I'm still figuring it out like as I go. And so if a friend calls me something or refers me, I don't know, by something, and I'm like, "Oh, ooh, I didn't like that." They'll be like, "Okay, noted." Like, noted for the future. Or if I'm like, "Oh, like, I really liked how you called me that." Like, it's something that we communicate back and forth, you know?
Hmm.
And so we have that open line of communication where we're like, and we do that for each other too, because we have, several people in our friend group who are also figuring it out.
Hmm.
And that helps too, because I think that we should always be kind of figuring stuff out. Like, we should never be um, completely in one place. We should always be open to change. And, um, there's a quote, I have it on my wall right here. So I'm looking at it like, you're allowed to be both a masterpiece and a work in progress simultaneously. Um, And so I think that when I look at all my friends too, I think that, we're all works in progress, but we're all masterpieces too. Like, look how beautiful we are. Look how, and that's something back to like those kind of compliments, whether they're like feminine or masculine. A lot of times we like beautiful or handsome, or that's something we talked about too. But anyway, that just popped in my head. But we're all these like works in progress, but we're all masterpieces. We're all um, going on, a journey to figure ourselves out, to find ourselves.
Hmm.
And so I think that there's that mutual respect there.
As you've started to explore this, like I said again, that you're fairly new to this. We talked a little bit about coming out to your circle of friends, and everybody was sort of like, "Yeah, we know." What was your experience in coming out to family, and how did you approach that?
Yeah. So whenever I came out as bisexual a few years ago, I kind of like made a big deal about it. Like, not a huge deal about it, but I was just kind of like, I was terrified, really, um, to come out to family, to come out, especially to my biological family. Um, and so, I like wrote this whole letter to my mom and like met her in person, even though she like lives like thousands of miles away. And for this, I was just like, kind of like, I'm done. Like, I'm done coming out in like really extravagant ways, I guess. Um, and so I posted like on social media and was just kind of like, hey, this is me. Some of you know, some of you don't. Now you do. Like, and some, and you know, my my biological family did not has not even talked to me about it. Has not mentioned it to me. Has not, which is something that they do. They pretend things don't exist,
Mm.
um, that they are uncomfortable with. Um, and because if they do say something, because they're still very much evangelical, they know that I will be upset and make boundaries. And so uh, they don't want that to happen. So they just kind of like have this weird, like neutral relationship with me where we talk about very mundane things like the weather. And they pretend that I'm not a queer disabled witch. And we just kind of go with that.
That's interesting. Yeah, I
My,
had that. I had that very similar experience recently, where we got to a point where I'm just like, I just had to put up boundaries and just said, okay, maybe we just won't for a while. And then it was just like, whoa, 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 like we can try and we can do these things. It's just like, oh, okay, that's nice.
yeah. Um, so I feel that that is probably coming, um, for me, more conversations, because I'm not avoiding it or anything, but I'm not like purposely bringing it up all the time. Um, I am not speaking with my biological father at the moment, because I set up those boundaries, and because he said really terrible things to me after I came out as bisexual. And so then I was just like, well, I don't really want you in my life, so you don't get access to me. Um, and that's been very awkward for the rest of my family. um, so that's been fun. For my spouse's family, it's been completely different. Um, First of all, my mother-in-law like missed the announcement on Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
and but then saw some. Uh, oh, I think I updated my profile picture and I put a little commentary that said like these titties are non-binary too, or something like that. And she texted me. She was like, is this some millennial like lingo that I don't understand? Or are you coming out as non-binary? Like, and I was like, well, I already came out, but I think you missed it. Like, sorry. Like, and she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, when did this happen? Like, I haven't been on Facebook. And I'm like, I came out on all the social medias, but okay. And I just kind of was like, told her, and we kind of had like this text exchange about it, that was actually super cute, because she was like, yeah, she's like, I understand like binary transition and like what that looks like and stuff. She's like, but like I'm gonna work on like figuring this out, and so I was just like, well, just because have you watched The Good Place?
Yes, great show.
So I was like, just imagine I'm Janet, like I'm not a girl, and and I'm obviously not a boy either, and and she's like, oh, that's perfect, okay.
Found a framing for it that could sink in for her. That's
Yes,
great.
yes. So I think that's where representation matters in a lot of things too. Is it helps family understand their loved ones as well as people seeing themselves. But otherwise, most people just were like cool and moved on or unfriended me. Either one of them, one or the other.
Isn't it nice the quiet, you are so afraid when you come out of the negative reaction and all of the vitriol you'll get from all the people that you know. And it's just like you either get support or like maybe some questions from the ones that are struggling, and then the ones that truly have a problem just sort of fade away. It's like, oh, that's nice.
Fine.
Yeah. Yeah, there's the door. Don't let it hit you on the way out.
I'm like, the in-between people, really bothers me more than just the people who unfriend and leave your life. Like, the people who try to stick around but aren't affirming, and you have to navigate, boundaries and being like, okay, where is the line for my mental health and my sanity, versus like the people who are just like, okay, see ya.
Well, and those people that you have a relationship, that you have a strong friendship with, and you want to maintain that, and they're like not trouncing on your boundaries, but they're kind of stepping on them a bit, and you're like, oh, do I kind of give because it's more comfortable for me right now and not to make a stink? Or do I just look like a militant bitch for like always being like, no, you have to like, it's a very interesting thing to try and learn to navigate, what the people that you care for in some way. And yeah,
I've decided right now I'm a militant bitch.
I like it. I love that level of self-respect. I think that's kind of the main place that comes from, that not only self-respect, but that confidence in yourself, that like I am who I am. I deserve to be here. I deserve to be who I am. I deserve to feel to be safe and comfortable in that. And no one has the right to step on that, no matter what their station is in life or their relation to me. I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate that a lot. As someone who identifies as non-binary and gender fluid, I'm curious to find out what, and I know this is I usually say in this spot, what transition means to you. I wouldn't, as a non-binary person, I feel like it's less of a transition, but more of a gender exploration journey, more of a finding yourself and exploring that. What does that process mean to you? And what is it? What is it meant for you?
I think that being able to just say it out loud, like, I'm non-binary, I am gender fluid, I don't fit in the gender binary. Like, saying those things out loud gives myself permission to explore gender in a way that isn't socially acceptable, I guess you could say. Um, so I guess you could say my transition is never ending. And that is exciting. Like, that gives me freedom. That can be like, maybe tomorrow I'll feel a little different about this. That's okay. Like, maybe tomorrow my pronouns will change. Maybe tomorrow I'll be like, hey, actually today, please call me this. Please refer to me in this way. And knowing that I have people in my life where I can ask for those things and people will affirm me gives me, yeah, great excitement and curiosity for each day going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Of being able to explore and portray my gender in different ways that feel euphoric and wonderful to me personally.
Mm-hmm.
So whether that is, how I dress or exploring clothing, exploring just, just how I present myself to the world, or just saying like, fuck it, like, I am non-binary, but that doesn't mean that I owe you androgyny, right? That doesn't mean that I owe you, like, I don't even know what androgyny is anymore. Like, honestly, like, sometimes I feel like I'm like, okay, I'm gonna look as gender fluid as possible today. What does that look like? Like, okay, does that mean like I wear like makeup and like, or no makeup and like grunge clothing? Like, I'm like trying to like figure it out. And then I'm like, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I shouldn't have to portray myself in a way that people look at me and say, oh, they're non-binary. Like, oh, that's a really androgynous person. Because
Mm-hmm.
honestly, like, I don't really see myself as like an androgynous person. I'm like, I like kind of like playing with the extremes a little bit, or having both.
Yeah, I keep picturing, and I've got to see you at some point. And I know it's incredibly rude to like say you have to try this, but I just hope that I can influence you to do it. I just see you in a really a nice fitting slender gray suit with a matching fedora. Like,
Okay.
I just
Yes.
I want to see that. I think you could kill that.
Can I wear combat boots with this gray suit?
Oh, yes, please. Either combat boots or contrasting Converse.
Yes, I have both. So
There you go.
that's something that I recently purchased a suit, and I'm going to have it fitted or like altered, I guess, to kind of tapered to fit me. But that's something that I definitely want to look more into, is suits, because
So
suspenders are one thing. I'm like, I like suspenders. They're fun.
nice. So Bram Ray, who's a friend of yours, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that username here. Um,
Yes.
but they say that they told you that too, the gray suit.
Yes.
But I think the fedora is key. Just a matching fedora, and I don't know how you do that one that matches like really really well. But I just see a great photo shoot coming. Yeah, the suspender. You're right. I even see the suspenders. Like that is yes, so much yes.
All right, I'll send it to you when I do that.
Great, great. You just tag me on your Instagram when you blow that up there. So as we wrap up this section here, is there anything you feel that you've been able to accomplish specifically because of your gender exploration and what this has unlocked for you in finding this identity?
Yeah. Friendships and beautiful conversations. I mean, and seeing cis people start to get it a little bit. Um, because I think still here in Southeast Kansas, people see it as a little foreign. And so being able to, something that we do with Q Space is do a kind of LGBTQ 101 trainings and more in-depth trainings for the community. And so being able to lead those trainings now and kind of use myself as an example and talk through that with people, they're like, oh, okay, yeah. Like I can see it now because yeah, I'm standing there in front of them. And so, and also having like conversations with people. Um, like I was correcting someone at a local bar, like when they misgendered my friend, and the person was like, he was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't really understand like non-binary," and I was like, That's okay, you don't have to understand it." Like, I'm like, "You just have to like respect it," and they were like, "So they use they," and I was like, "Yes," and and they're like, "I don't think I've ever met a non-binary person before," and I was like, "Well, I'm non-binary too," and they're just like, "Oh." I could just see their mind exploding, right? And I was like, "Yeah, well, we'll continue this later." But yeah, being able to have those conversations, and I think for me, I think it's really important for me personally to be as open as possible with the people around me and on social media and being as authentic and honest as possible, because I know that that matters to people. Um, and it mattered, it matters to me to see those stories, and it matters to other people to see those stories. And for people who I get messages from telling me that, they're like, "I'm not ready to come out yet, but your story resonated with me. Thank you for like speaking out about it," or "Thank you for sharing, publicly." And so I know that that matters to people.
Hmm. So do you have a favorite thing that you've learned along your journey? Either
Hmm.
about the world around you or about yourself?
I've become a lot more comfortable with not knowing things. um, and saying like, "I don't know." I don't have to be the person that knows everything to you. I can share my story, but that doesn't mean I'm like the expert on this at all.
Mhm.
And it also means that you know, like I said, I see my identity as very fluid, and so change is imminent. And that's something that uh, as a person who likes routine, as a person who likes organization, a person who likes things in their place, like it kind of, which, you might not have seen throughout this show, but I do. um, it it is unsettling to me. Like if 10 years ago me saw me on this show, probably would be freaking out, having an autistic meltdown right now, and not knowing that they had autism. But like because that's scary.
Mm-hmm.
And it is scary. Yeah. And I honestly don't like being in the in between, but then I just suddenly find myself there all the time. Like, because it's scary. And like being in the in between, as far as like being non-binary, being bisexual, being um, someone who says both all the time, like, or all of the above, um, to questions, is something that I find myself in all the time, in the crossroads.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I find myself there, the more I feel just maybe a little bit more comfortable there. But also, it reminds me that like it's okay to be uncomfortable, and that kind of pushes me to find myself even more, if that makes sense. Like every time I'm a little
Yeah.
bit more uncomfortable, then like I'm like, oh, I figured this out and I figured that out, and I meet these people, and that's when life gets better.
That's a very key point, that peace, coming to a place of peace with that discomfort, or with the places that are out of the normal comfort zone. That totally makes sense of how you break free from the binary, because that's what it is. It's a box that you're placed in. You're told to be there. You're given all the tools to be there. Like, this is how you got to be and all that stuff. And then you need to break out of that. And it's very discomforting, disquieting.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. And I've kind of gotten a little bit more comfortable with things not making any sense, but also making sense at the same time. Like I tell people, when people refer to me, I'm like, yeah, I use they them pronouns and I use they fair pronouns, but like my body, which I've done some like embodiment coaching, and like realizing that, my body is a person, and that I am in a relationship with and need to communicate with, and my body communicates to me too. When I need rest, my body tells me. um, and I'm like, so when I refer to my body, I refer to her as she, and I use she her pronouns. But I'm like, but when I refer to myself, I use they them pronouns a lot of times, or they fair pronouns. And to some people, like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, it doesn't matter. It makes sense to me in my brain. I'm like, and then I told someone the other day, I was like, yeah, my body uses she, her pronouns. My mind uses they, them pronouns, and my heart uses they, fair pronouns. It's all fine.
I love it. Yeah, just throw that out there and just watch it circle it again, watch the head explode, right? I love it.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this section, what advice do you have for young or closeted trans folks out there, trans, non-binary, gender fluid, anybody out there that's going through some of these things and questioning who they are?
Yeah. Yeah, it's super tough space, especially if you don't feel like you have safe people around you to talk to about that. And I think that was um my say is my I don't want to say saving grace. That's what coming to my mind right now. I don't know why. But like that's what saved me, is like I had people around me that that cared for me. So if you don't feel like or know if you have safe people around, I think that's really difficult. But I think that there are safe people, and to find them, whether those people are teachers, whether those people are friends, whether those people are coaches or mentors, or whether those people are your coworkers, or finding those safe people, or whether those people are online and you've never met them in your life, um, finding people with similar stories, but also just finding people who are safe, people who will accept you for who you are. It doesn't matter, what their identity is or what their story is, but I think you can find the safe people, and be able to slowly grow like your network of trust, and being able to be yourself in your world.
Akari comments that actually that makes perfect sense to me. However, for me, it's with a distinct twist, and maybe we'll get into that after we take a little bit of a break and get into everybody's comments and questions.
Yeah.
Allie, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story. I think we've got a lot of key things out, and it's always really exciting to be able to talk to somebody outside of the gender binary, which is where I fit and where most of the people that I run into for whatever reason do. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of that.
Thank you so much for having me, Emily. It's been a pleasure.